It's almost impossible for a conventional, traditional pro-Israel Democrat to make it through a typical primary process.
Yes.
It's very difficult for a pro-Jewish or pro-Israel Republican to enter a primary process. Look, I don't believe in the Great Replacement theory. So you have now, these ideas have been really institutionalized and embedded in the fabric of our political parties.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Western Spirit here from Israel. And today with us, we have someone very special all the way from America, Jonathan Greenblatt. He's the CEO of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. And we're going to talk to him about, I guess, what is happening to American Jewry and how we can help, and also just to understand, I guess, where we are. So, yeah. Jonathan, it's a pleasure to have you on with us.
It is so nice to be on your podcast, Ariel. Thank you for having me.
So, just interestingly, we were going to do it from afar, and then I heard you're here, so I jumped on the bandwagon.
Great. I'm glad to be in the studio with you.
Yeah. So, I want to start with, we were speaking off before we started recording about October 7th and the aftermath. And what do you agree I've spoken with lots of people that were in America on October 7th that live there, that there is this sort of October 8th Jew, that things will never be the same, obviously in Israel, but in America, for American Jewry, that something switched, something changed. A lot of people can't put their finger on it. Their Jewish identity went way up. Like, they felt Jewish, even if until then they just knew they were Jewish, but there was nothing besides just knowing that. Something changed. Can you talk about that?
I think that's correct. So I think it's Rabbi David Ingber, who's a really remarkable leader in New York. I think he had the phrase that pretty much hits it. He said something like there was an attack on Israel on October the 7th, and at the same time they declared war on the Jews. And it's true. I mean, what you saw happen in New York, literally the same day.
Yes. What
you saw happen in London, in Sydney, all around the world, on college campuses, in public spaces, this extraordinary outpouring of hate.
Yeah.
And it was unmistakable. That was jarring for many Jewish people.
Were you surprised yourself?
Well, look, I would say the following. I had literally written a book a few years earlier called It Could Happen Here.
Yeah.
And my book was literally about the fact that I felt like we were in an environment where the conditions were such that if you struck a match, the whole thing could go up.
Which is what happened.
And it had been building. I think something to keep in mind is that, the ADL, we're the oldest anti-hate organization in America. We've been tracking and responding to anti-Semitism longer than anybody else. Mm-hmm. So our data already showed us that the percentage of the population with intense anti-Jewish attitudes had increased dramatically over the years. The number of anti-Semitic incidents, acts of harassment, vandalism had skyrocketed before October the 7th. So the indicators were there if you were paying attention. What did surprise me, so let's say I wasn't shocked.
Right.
However, what did surprise me was the velocity of it and the volume. So I would not have guessed that literally on the same day, when we were seeing reports of the savagery, and keep in mind, if we go back to that horrible, horrible Black Saturday, we were all trying to make sense of what happened, right? Nobody even understood.
Yes. Even here in Israel.
Everyone was confused, just perplexed. It was a moment of tremendous confusion. And that very same day, as the news reports were coming in, you had people in the United States celebrating publicly.
Yeah.
Which was extraordinary. And then the speed with which that spread across the country was also extraordinary. So look, the ADL, we monitor extremist movements. And I could tell you there were signs that sort of anti-Jewish extremists, were ready for something, but I don't think we imagined it would again spread so far, so fast, and so ferociously. This was the thing, Ariel, like the level of venom in people's voices was shocking to a lot of us. So that phrase, October 8th Jew, it's a real thing.
Can you talk about one of the things that is interesting to me, and I think very unique to the place where we are now after the attacks 2.5, 3 years ago at this point almost, is that it was institutional hate, meaning you always had, when I grew up in America, when we thought about anti-Jewish hate, anti-Semitism, you always had like neo-Nazis in some place and everyone, and you had the random, thing, but it wasn't institutional. It wasn't supported, at least the way we looked at it. I assume you have examples from the organization of things.
Many, many, many.
But what I mean, like growing up as an ultra-Orthodox, very visible Jew, I myself never experienced, I think, anti-Semitism. But after October 7th, again, I assume there were instances, many even, but it wasn't the way it is now, in the sense that Columbia University, I'm just giving an example, but it's also Harvard and it's also NYU, where I have family that lives right next to there, and we saw the protests. Professors, sometimes even administrators, sometimes politicians who were in places of very high power, not like some low-level person, were actively sometimes supporting these anti-Jewish places. And when I say anti-Jewish, and I know people are like, oh no, it's just against Israel. We had, where I grew up, people protesting synagogues.
Yeah, look.
You don't protest a synagogue if you're just anti-Israel.
Yeah, look, like it is kind of like a sleight of hand.
Yes.
When people say, oh, I'm not anti-Jewish, just anti-Israel. Look, if you can't understand that there's a Jewish connection to this place, you're anti-Jewish.
Exactly.
Like, it's not hard.
But do you agree with the institutional part?
Yeah, it's an interesting choice of words on your part. So I would say if we were to try to understand what's happened, I think first anti-Semitism was what let's acknowledge, let's step back. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's called the oldest hatred. It's been around for thousands of years.
Yes.
Jews have lived in diaspora as a landless, minority in all over Europe, the Middle East, Latin America, etc. And so in these places where we had a different religion and maybe a different language and different culture, we were an easy target for the king or the pope
others,
or the caliph. Yeah, we always played that role. And so we've always, if you will, been in this very precarious situation.
Yes.
Now, that being said, I think in America, understanding that anti-Semitism has always existed, and when ADL was founded in 1913, there were laws that kept Jews from buying homes in places.
Yes.
There were quotas that kept Jews out of universities. Yeah. There were policies that kept Jews out of different professions and so on. New York.
Yes.
Like Mount Sinai
Columbia,
Hospital in New York. Right. Mount Sinai Hospital in New York was created. They used to call it the Jews' hospital because Jews couldn't get medical treatment at other hospitals.
Yeah.
And universities like Columbia either kept Jews out entirely or artificially kept their numbers low.
Yeah.
Literally in the 10s and 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, ADL was the organization that led the efforts to change those laws. It changed the discriminatory practices, changed the quotas. ADL did all that. So over time, I would say anti-Semitism was a marginal phenomenon. It existed, but as you said, you really had bad actors who were kind of very fringy. Now, I think we've seen three phases in the last kind of 20 years. Mm-hmm. I think first you had anti-Semitism being legitimized, like legitimization. So legitimization meant saying, oh, this anti-Zionism idea, it's really just a political concept. It's not a problem. It's just our political view. Even though, again, anti-Zionism is clearly anti-Semitism, they claw that in like a pseudo-political argument. Like they used to say, Jewish people, it's not that I hate them, they're just a different race. And that's like Hitlerian or Nazi-esque anti-Semitism, right? It's not our fault. We're just a different race and not a human race. That's what Hitler used to say. So anyways, first you had legitimization. Then it moved from being legitimized as like a valid form of, by the way, I should also just say like the Great Replacement theory.
Yes.
The idea that Jews are intentionally trying to displace minorities because we seek to commit white genocide. So anti-Zionism may come most often from the left, though not always. And the Great Replacement theory typically comes from the far right.
Yes.
These ideas have been legitimized. Then the second phase was mainstreaming. And so mainstreaming was the people proposing these ideas, Rashida Tlaib or Edward Said.
On the left, and then on the right, Tucker,
and then
and
Tucker
all these
Carlson.
others.
Like sort of going from the extreme into the mainstream and sort of laundering these ideas into the political discourse or the public conversation. Now, this is the third phase, as you were just saying, what I call institutionalization.
Yeah.
So now you see it's not easy. In fact, I might go as far as say it's almost impossible for a conventional, traditional pro-Israel Democrat to make it through a typical primary process.
Yes.
It's very difficult for a typical, it could be difficult, I should say. It could be for like a pro-Jewish or pro-Israel Republican to enter a primary process. Like, I don't believe in the great replacement theory. So you have now, these ideas have been really institutionalized and embedded in the fabric of our political parties. Now, I think the thing that's scary is the capture that we see on the left, if you will, far outpaces what we're seeing on the
Yes.
right. On the political right in the United States, you have this dynamic playing out where people like Mike Huckabee, your ambassador
Ben
here,
Shapiro
or
and
Ben
all these other-
Shapiro, or Mike Huckabee, Ben Shapiro, Mark Levin,
Glenn Beck, even as
Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz.
These are like Jews and non-Jews pushing back on the toxic poison of Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, etc. That's a great thing. You're not seeing a similar fight on the left.
How do you explain it, by the way? Because it's very weird. Most Jews in America are Democrats.
Yeah, I mean,
It's just a fact. It
is.
always has been, at
neither-
least since FDR has been, probably ever. But and yet the party has totally been taken over, it seems to me, by, I would say, just like really crazy people. The fringes have basically taken over the base. In the primary system, you have to get the more, I guess, excited people to vote for you because they are going out to vote in the primary system.
Yeah, so for your listeners' benefit, in the United States, we have primaries before the general election. And in primaries, typically, not always, but typically, you have what they're called closed primaries. So only people of the party can vote for the party nominee. And so what that tends to do is, indeed, the hardest core people show up. The people who are often the hardest core, the most intense, are people kind of often most extreme.
Yeah.
And so certainly in the Democratic Party, what you've seen happen, and I don't think you can just write it off as crazy because I think it's deliberate. The party has been captured by ideologues and like dogmatic people with a very doctrinaire view who believe that Israel is a settler colonial, even though Zionism is a liberation movement, right? The return
Also,
of
we're
Jews
against
to their colonized land.
Jonathan, can I just interject?
Please.
It's so weird, this whole concept, because the British colonialists were here and the Zionist groups, the Haganah and all these, were fighting the colonialists to kick them out so the indigenous Jews, and by the way, also the Arabs, would get more rights. It's like they turned the whole concept on its head, and this history has been totally hijacked, the narrative and the way people think about what happened. Yeah. I think it started in the universities and now it's trickled into the party.
I think that's all right. I think what you've seen is kind of a Said's view of Orientalism has been sort of taken as, I mean, it's a flawed framework to begin with on the Jewish. That's the only reason.
Yes.
It becomes exemplified as settler colonialism or the West projection of itself, even though like my wife's family's from Iran.
Yes.
I mean, they're
and we're
darker
going to talk about
complexion
Iran
than you
soon.
and me. So the idea that they're settlers is silly.
Yes.
I mean, Iran itself was colonized, if you will, by Muslims from the Arabian Peninsula, whatever, 1,000 years ago. So who was the colonizers here?
Exactly. So this is the part that I think.
I tell you one other thing. I was at the Munich Security Conference last weekend. I had the displeasure of sitting behind Mustafa Barghouti, and he was wearing a lapel pin with a key on it. You know, that's his shtick. And I felt like saying, where's the key for my grandfather's house in Berlin or Magdeburg? My grandfather's a Holocaust survivor from Germany. Where's the key for my wife's house in Tehran? Because they had to flee for their lives. Like, why do you think that I believe all of us are entitled to certain rights, right? But we have to earn those rights. You can be entitled to the right, but in order to exercise it, you have to behave in a certain kind of way.
Yeah.
You have to show up in a certain manner. And the idea that the situation is really upside down, truly upside down.
And it's only upside down because, which is the reason why anti-Zionism is Jew hatred. Because if it was any other people, I don't think there's no way because there has been waves of displaced people over the years. And then there's no refugee that carries on 3-4 generations after. And like, my wife's parents are from Isfahan in Iran and from Baghdad in Iraq. No one's going to give them back the key.
Who gets the key to their home in Baghdad?
Exactly.
Tell me that.
Exactly.
Look, I think we have to recognize that anti-Semitism, one of its characteristics that makes it so unique, is that there are these tropes or myths, right?
Yes.
And they persist over generations. They may mutate a little bit, but they persist. So one of the attributes is illegitimacy. So first, if you look at anti-Jewish hatred, if you will, like classic European and also some Middle Eastern Jew hatred, to use the term, was based on our faith,
Right.
right? That we didn't accept Jesus or we didn't accept
Or
Muhammad.
that we killed Jesus.
We killed Jesus. And so essentially you had a kind of anti-Judaism, that our faith was illegitimate. And then that, after the Age of Enlightenment, when people realized, the earth, the sun isn't rotating around the earth, and there's this thing called gravity, you had the advent of the Age of Reason. And one of the aspects is that, again, the scientific method and whatnot. People say, well, maybe the Jewish faith isn't illegitimate. But then you had the emergence of eugenics, this pseudoscience.
Yeah.
It's the Jewish race that is illegitimate. So you had anti-Judaism, and then the term anti-Semitism was coined in the late 1800s.
In Germany, right?
In Austria, actually, by
Austria.
Wilhelm Marr, who basically said the Jews are a Semitic race. So what he tried to do is say, I don't hate Jews, but he took this pseudo-scientific term, I'm just an anti-Semite. Right. And so he used this phrase, which we still now use, to describe his Jew hatred.
He was proud of being an anti. That was the point. It was a good
scientific position.
Yes.
It wasn't, he said, a prejudice. It was a scientific position. Then, of course, the Holocaust happened.
Yes.
So now people say, whoa, 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 I don't hate the Jewish faith, and I don't hate the Jewish race. I just hate the Jewish state. Mm-hmm. And so now, in the same way Marr used anti-Semitism to clothe his bigotry, now they use anti-Zionism to clothe their bigotry. But it's the same hatred of us just because we're different.
So I would say that, like you said, on the right, it's the same old anti-Semitism a lot of times. They literally talk about there's a Christian anti-Semitism on the right, where you see it a lot, the Heritage American crowd that says, like, America's a Christian country and therefore Jews are the problem, basically. It's weird they don't talk about other religions the same way they talk about Jews, but we'll put that aside. And then you have on the other side, like you said, the left-wing, more intellectualized anti-Semitism, settler colonialist claims, and that, it seems, is permeating into the party. The young guns of the party, the AOC, who was at the Munich conference and gave a big, like, this was her coming out on international affairs, which is a little bit weird. She didn't, it was not a coherent talk by her, but putting that aside, she is the rising star, the fresh face of the party, has been for a few years. Her language of talking about Israel is the settler colonialist language, and she's very popular in the party and in her. And how do you, like, what can we do in terms of Jews in America? And they see this, they're very worried. Is it what they did, for example, with Jamal Bowman, where my father lives, where they basically primaried him and put a lot of Jewish money in trying to defeat him, where they did? Can they do that over and over when the base itself is not really there in general?
So there's a lot to unpack in your question. It's the right question. So number one, I think we need to recognize that and this is our view at ADL. I mean, so again, ADL, we basically have three lines of business, Ariel. We protect, we advocate, and we educate. And so we protect our community by doing things like tracking and responding to incidents, monitoring and disrupting extremists, and of course, we also educate and train law enforcement. But under advocacy, we do political advocacy, like in Congress or at the state houses. We do legal advocacy. We litigate in the courts. We do shareholder advocacy, which would be of interest to, like, the Globe's audience, right? Because we have a publicly traded ETF on the New York Stock Exchange. We're fighting BDS in the boardroom and in capital markets. We also do education advocacy. And finally, this is the key thing. We educate. Because you can't just, like, lobby or arrest people. You have to change hearts and minds.
Right.
So for years, we've done education through classrooms. ADL is one of the largest providers in America of anti-hate content in schools. We reach like 5.5 million kids a year. But ultimately, kids today, they're not learning just in classrooms. They're learning, like, on their phones. They're learning via TikTok. They're learning in the culture. So to answer your question, we need to recognize that to win the culture war, we've got to be engaged with others. So it is not easy. But we're not going to defeat our enemies if we simply think we can get it all done ourselves. We have to build walls to keep ourselves safe. We also have to build bridges to work with others. And so as it relates to like extreme candidates, if you will, I don't think we should think, oh, the Jews alone can defeat XYZ candidate. I think we need to demonstrate the rationality of our position, the morality of our position, and bring others along. I'm not saying it's easy. So as it relates to how do we respond to these candidates espousing extremist views, we have to expose them for what they are. We have to use facts and data, but also stories to humanize it so people understand. I mean, the genocide against Israel, the claim of genocide against the Jewish state is like the claim of deicide against the Jewish people. It's a blood libel. And so we need to call that for what it is and not be afraid to say it's a blood libel. The facts don't bear it out. Just ask that woman from Oxfam. Did you see that the other day? The CEO of Oxfam UK, she resigned, and she said they had an obsession with Israel. They only focused on Gaza. They
Also, Human Rights Watch.
Human Rights Watch, the same.
They put out one of their top people in the past said, like, we were focused on Israel so much we didn't have the time or something to that effect. Like we couldn't be too focused on other places because we were really into Israel.
So this is that capture.
Yeah.
This is like the capture of, if I could describe it, sort of the institutional left. So I don't think all people on the left are this way, but activists have been able to go in and exploit these open systems to insert their ideology. We need to dismantle it. So I don't think we can give up, number one. And number two, like what that means is if you're a Jewish Democrat, like fight for your party. If you're a Jewish Republican, fight for your party. Make allies with others inside your party. Don't abandon your party. Don't say, oh, I can't win here, so I'm leaving. No. You got to dig in and fight for what you have. So I think that's first. And then I think secondly, we just need to be quicker and more courageous. So I actually think the fight has moved to a degree, Ariel, from sort of these offline environments to online spaces. Like at ADL, we are super focused on generative AI. We're focused on the LLMs and how they get built, whether it's through Reddit or through Wikipedia.
Reddit's horrible, by the way. And Wikipedia also. I'm in touch a little bit with one of their founders.
With Larry?
No, with Jimmy.
Jimmy, he's a very decent guy.
Yeah, and he admits that it's not what their mission was, what's happening now.
Look, let's talk about Wikipedia, because ADL's been super focused on Wikipedia. In fact, you may remember this story. It was about a year, maybe 2 years ago, when we woke up one morning to learn that Wikipedia had determined, after some internal process, that ADL was no longer, quote unquote, a credible source on anti-Semitism. So the Wikipedia editors decided this. We woke up and we said, wait, well, what is that?
Right.
Who are they? So then we started digging in, and you find out pretty quickly, and we have pretty good analytics at ADL and pretty good like forensic capabilities, that there's a handful of editors who are working in violation of their rules in coordination with one another. And they, over time, were able to kind of tilt things in a very skewed direction. So now we come back to like, how does this happen? It's because activists exploit open systems. Yeah. And I think sometimes I think we are naive. And other times I think we're just not paying attention. But as Jews, we need to recognize, and here in Israel, I remember this happened to me in December of 23. I was here. So about 2 months after October 7th. And I met with a retired Israeli general. And he said to me, Jonathan, we're fighting a 7-front war, he said. Let's see if I can remember the fronts. Gaza, the West Bank, Syria, Lebanon,
Iran,
Yemen, Iraq, he said. Iran wasn't even a thing yet.
The militias in Iraq.
The militias in Iraq. And Iran was the puppeteer behind all this. And I said to him, with all due respect, I think you're missing the 8th front. There are 8 fronts. What do you mean? I said the 8th front is the information environment. Like that's the battle space that I see in the United States. Flash forward to February 2026 as we sit here today. Israel, I think, undoubtedly has won. I mean, the Iraqi militias have been humbled. Hezbollah has been almost destroyed. Hamas has been battered. The West Bank's under control, and so on and so forth. Yeah. But the information battle space remains an environment of tremendous concern. So I think we can't afford to be naive. And we can't afford to not being paid attention, but we've got to fight on all fronts.
Can I ask you, so what do you think of one of the things that is leveled, I guess, at the ADL by people who don't like you
And there are lots of them.
Yes, is that there's a few things that I've seen, like looking up towards the conversation, is that you are trying to stifle free speech.
Yes.
And my question is, like in the UK, in Canada, you have laws against hate. And not each country's different type of laws, but in general, there isn't the First Amendment. Even in Israel, there isn't the First Amendment. There's certain speech that you'd be arrested for here.
Right.
But it doesn't really work in the sense that UK is way more dangerous for Jews in general than America.
Yes.
How do you look at speech? Should people be investigated for being anti-Semitic?
No.
What is the proper government response to individual haters of Jews?
So look, the ADL, again, it was founded 113 years ago.
Yes.
The ADL, our founders recognized what I recognize, which is that Jewish success in the United States, and I would go so far as to say, Ariel, with the exception of, like in diaspora, so I'm not including, Medinat Yisrael, but in diaspora, America has been far and away the greatest haven for the Jewish people in our, history, and part of the success over our last 250 years has been the First Amendment, which guarantees things like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. And so at the ADL, we have fought ferociously for the First Amendment for 100 plus years. But we also need, and I believe that still today, like the First Amendment is essential to the liberties we enjoy in the United States, which itself has helped the United States enjoy hundreds of years of success. But freedom of speech is not the freedom to slander people. There are laws against that. And if I slander you, make some unsubstantiated libelous claim, I can be sued. Freedom of assembly is not the freedom to assemble around a synagogue and threaten to kill the people inside. No. And freedom of, expression is not the freedom to incite violence against someone because of where they're from or how they pray or anything else. So we do have freedom of speech in America, but there are limits. We have gun ownership in America, Second Amendment, but there are limits, and so on and so forth. So I think freedom of expression is essential to American exceptionalism, an essential element of Jewish success in America, but there's limits. So do I think people should be able to say what they want? Absolutely, on a college campus, but there are time, place, and manner restrictions. If you yell fire in a crowded theater where there is no fire, you can be arrested for that, for causing a public disturbance. And again, I don't think you should be able to say, from the river to the sea, or scream from the river to the sea at Jewish kids walking into a Hillel to attend a Friday night service. And I don't think you should be able to chant, Israel's committing genocide, at a Hanukkah ceremony, right? And if you want to say it in a public place, I get it. So then you create buffer zones, or you let them say it not standing in front of the Jewish people while they're worshiping. So I say all of that because, yes, freedom of speech, but there should be certain guardrails. That isn't stifling free speech, but it's being smart to create the conditions in which everyone can enjoy their privileges and their liberties. So that's the way that we look at it at ADL. Now, one of the places criticism has been leveled on us is what we've done online, because I've been very outspoken about
with the social media companies and everything.
And again, I think the deal there is if you publish something in a newspaper, like in Globes, or you print something in a magazine, or you post something on a billboard outside, or you show something on your television program, or you broadcast something on your radio show. In the United States, if you say something libelous, again, an unsubstantiated claim that defames someone, you get sued. However, there's an exception in the law. There's a loophole in the United States. You can't be sued or held liable, even if you publish libel on your social media platform.
Right. It's the
called Section 230.
230, which means that because you're not a publisher, you are I forgot what it's called, a facilitator, basically. So like you're not responsible if someone else writes on your platform something.
Right. And so the analogy they've used is like Bell, like the telephone company, is not responsible if someone uses the phone to threaten someone. If I call you and say, I'm going to kill you, the phone company's not responsible for that, right? I am for saying it. So the difference here, though, with social media and all these kind of online platforms is when I call you and say that to you, that's a 1-for-1. However, when I publish that on Facebook and the algorithm promotes that, It's a very different kind of speech. It is a broadcast. And so I believe that the social media companies, simply put, should be held to the same standard we hold all other media companies to. That body of law was developed over hundreds of years. It worked very well. What the social media companies have done is shown us that they can demolish it, and in doing so, divide our country and demolish our society. So I don't believe in stifling free speech. I simply think the same rules should apply to online media that apply to offline media. Plain and simple.
But wait, that people will say to you, especially on the right, that during the COVID situation and during the 2020 elections, for example, the Hunter Biden story that the New York Post put out, that was stopped on X, Twitter at the time, where you couldn't even send it in private messages. The America's now Health and Secretary RFK was basically the social media companies were told by the Biden administration to take down posts of his, and some of the posts at least were eventually proven to be correct. And I don't know about everything, but some. And I guess people would say, if you give them that power, or if you give the government that power to do what you're saying, you would be stifling free speech in letting the authorities do what they've already done without these laws. Could you imagine with these laws?
Well, look, like I understand the point you're making. I just see it a little bit differently. So I'm not excusing what the federal government did vis-a-vis Hunter Biden's laptop or restricting information on COVID. I'm not excusing that at all. Mm-hmm. What I think is that the company should simply be held to the same standard as broadcast media. So that doesn't mean that the government can tell you what to publish or not to publish. It simply means if you publish something that threatens someone's life, that libels someone, that creates a condition in which someone is imperiled because the information is false, the online company should be responsible for it.
That you can sue not only the person who wrote it, but actually the company that allowed for it to be published.
Correct.
Would they be getting... so I guess the companies probably tell you that the sheer volume of people is too difficult for them.
Sure, they say that. So you know what my answer is? Figure it out. You're the most... Look, these are the most successful companies, not just in business, but in the history of business. Mm-hmm. Profit margins of 80+%. These are software companies essentially. So and they're the most innovative businesses. You know what's hard? What's hard is building a company like Facebook did, right? That has something like half of the planet using their services in 20 years, less than 20 years. You know what's hard? What's hard is creating a product like OpenAI that has hundreds of millions of people using it in like a matter of weeks. You know what should be easy? Knocking the Nazis off your platform, not allowing anti-Zionists to threaten Jewish people on your service. And if you can't solve that pretty simple, basic problem, maybe you shouldn't be in that business in the first place. So like if I had a car that couldn't install seatbelts, the DOT would say
wouldn't go on the road.
They wouldn't go on the road. And if I had a beverage product that had poison in it, they wouldn't let me sell it. So I think these social media companies should fix their products. And that would be better, not just for the Jewish people, but for all people. And again, that isn't censorship. It's simply saying there are laws of gravity that you need to abide by like everybody else. Right. Now, what they would say is, well, if we did that, then you might see less messages. Then you might have less, online traffic. Okay. I think that's a small price to pay for keeping people safe.
But don't you think that one of the things that I think Elon Musk bought Twitter, moved it to X, and one of his big things was free speech. Like, I'm letting everyone back on, all the people that the former company owners blocked and banned, and including the president. But other than that, like everyone, including Nazis, like Fuentes is on, and all these other crazy people, and really nefarious actors, by the way, from all over the world. The Ayatollah is on, which is like...
Yeah, the Ayatollah's on.
He's putting out all this stuff against like Jews and America.
Yeah.
His point was that I'm going to hold each country's speech according to the country. So if in America certain things are allowed, it will be allowed on X. If in the UK different stuff are allowed, I'll do according to the UK laws. That's not enough because you're saying the algorithm promotes the stuff. So the algorithm...
My argument would be like, look, if you want to use X, go use it. I wouldn't tell Elon or any entrepreneur what to do or not to do. I simply think X should abide by the same rules as, I don't know, NBC News should abide by the same rules as Comcast or whatnot. That's what I would say.
Okay.
So my point is not that Elon should or shouldn't allow the Nazis on his service. I think we as consumers have the choice whether to use it or not. And like, look, X is quite toxic today.
Yes.
The stuff on there.
It's an understatement.
Yeah, I mean, ADL tracks all this.
Yeah.
We actually just launched a few weeks ago, and I'm testifying the Knesset about it this week, something we call the AI Index. We evaluated the top 6 AI engines in the United States, their LLMs basically, to that, how they're handling issues of anti-Semitism and extremism. We did something like 40,000
Is Grok the worst?
queries. Yeah, Grok was performed the worst. Anthropic performed the best on 37 different metrics. Anthropic performed the best, followed by their Claude product, followed by ChatGPT, Gemini, DeepSeek, Llama, which is the Meta product, and then Grok. And so again, I can choose as a consumer whether I use Grok or not.
Right.
And Elon or the management at X can decide, or Grok as it were, can decide whether they're going to improve the LLM or not. I believe I'm a capitalist. I've been a successful business person for many years before this job. I'm an ardent capitalist. I think you should let the market decide. But government has a responsibility to create the guardrails, if you will. And all I'm talking about is putting up guardrails, not telling the companies within those guardrails how they should run their business.
He's, by the way, I think the most outspoken person. He's tweeted about you numerous times.
Yeah.
What he doesn't like you because you're the organization, the ADL has publicly called him out, or is it that you've, but in private meetings with him, told him to his face that you don't like? Why does he like?
Look, I can't explain what's in his head per se, but I will tell you something about ADL. I mean, number one, we are nonpartisan, which, I mean, so we certainly get involved in political issues of the day. However, we don't take partisan positions, right?
Yeah.
So I can tell you that there's a lot of people on the right who think I'm a woke Democrat.
Yes.
There are a lot of people on the left who think I'm a MAGA apologist. I'm neither of those things. My job at ADL is to call balls and strikes, to use a baseball analogy for your listeners. So it doesn't matter if the person standing at the plate is wearing a red jersey, if you will, or a blue jersey, same strike zone. So we're calling balls and strikes. While that applies in an obvious way to politics, it also applies to the rest of public life. So yeah, there are a lot of people in business, particularly in the tech companies, who get mad at ADL because we call them out. But it's my job. My job isn't to placate Elon Musk or to please, I don't know, whomever. My job is to protect the Jewish people. And so we will work, and I have worked with Elon where we can, and Twitter and X, and we'll call them out when we think we must. So I think the fact that we don't show favor to one side or the other side, the fact that we are relentlessly, rigorously objective means that a lot of people don't like you.
Yeah.
But Ariel, that's the job. That's the job. My job here isn't to make friends. Again, my job is to protect the Jewish people.
So another thing that I spoke with people in America about what they think about the ADL, Jews. Yeah. And Jews that lean right have told me that up until at least October 7th, the feeling was that you were, like you just said, more on the left, that you were more eager to call out anti-Jewish hate, anti-Semitism on the right, even when it was borderline. That was their point, that sometimes... For example, Turning Point USA was an example where you were they were on your website, I think, as, how would you explain?
Well, so let's step back. It's a good question.
Yeah.
It's worth talking about. So number one, again, ADL is a non-partisan organization. We're very focused on that. Now, on the other hand, if you read our mission statement, that was written, again, not by me, it was written in 1913. It says that we exist to, quote, stop the defamation of the Jewish people and secure justice and fair treatment to all. Now, secure justice and fair treatment to all has been interpreted by ADL CEOs since the organization was started as not just fighting anti-Jewish hate, but just fair treatment to all means fighting hate against everyone. So, for example, again, ADL fought for civil rights for black people in the 1940s. ADL fought for immigration reform in the 1950s. ADL fought for the LGBTQ community in the 1980s and 90s. And I say that because I think people need to keep in mind that we have always believed that the fight against hate is not just against anti-Semitism, it's against all forms of bigotry, okay?
Yeah.
And for equal treatment for all. Now, that being said, I would also point out that if we look at anti-Semitism as a phenomenon of like the last decade, let's say, I'm not arguing with the fact that we've seen a kind of hostile, anti-Jewish left capture institutions like academia and media. But if you go back to some of the most ugly, public, and violent instances over the last decade, start with Charlottesville in 2017.
Pittsburgh, no?
Pittsburgh. Charlottesville, 1 person killed. Pittsburgh, 11 people killed. Jersey City, or Poway, the attack on the Chabad outside San Diego, I think 1 person killed. Jersey City in 2019, do you remember that? The shooting at the kosher supermarket? It was a black Hebrew Israelite, 3 people killed.
Okay.
The stabbing of the rabbi at his home in Muncie in December 2019, a person was killed. There was a bunch of like spasms of violence in Brooklyn. Again, people were injured. Colleyville, Texas, 2021, where they took the rabbi and 3 congregants hostage. That was an ISIS-inspired person. But like if you look at Poway and Pittsburgh and Charlottesville, those are like right-wing extremists.
Yes.
White, open, unapologetic white supremacists. So there has certainly been real violence committed against Jews in the last few years by, again, what I would call right-wing extremists.
Yeah.
Now, in 2025, 20 people were killed, okay? 20 Jewish people were killed. We had a Jewish couple in D.C. outside the Capital Jewish Museum. We had an elderly Jewish woman in Boulder, Colorado, who was in a hostage march. Yeah. We had 2 Jewish people outside of Manchester.
In L.A., there was one guy in a pro-Israel protest.
That's a few years before. So that happened in 2024.
Okay. You're talking about 25.
Just 2025.
Okay.
We had 2 Jewish people killed outside of a synagogue in Manchester, UK. Then, of course, we had 15 people killed in Bondi Beach. That's 20 people. Those people were all killed by sort of
the pro-Palestine, generally speaking.
I'll call it pro-Hamas. But
yeah.
So, and those are all from, I don't even know if they're the ideological left. They're from like the Islamist kind of.
But it's a coalition.
But the left apologizes it. The left excuses it. The left finds a way to rationalize it. Like that is, in my mind, that is irrational and wrong. So I can't say that ADL is perfect. We've certainly have made our share of mistakes. We got to own that, Ariel, right? We have to own the fact that we did have Turning Point on our website.
Why were they? So my point is the thing that they'll tell me is that you were brushing too broad of a brush of who is an anti-Semite. So who is an anti-hate.
Okay, yeah. So we didn't call Turning Point anti-Semite, and Charlie Kirk certainly wasn't an anti-Semite. Right. In fact, he was very pro-Israel. There were elements of the people attracted to Turning Point, like Candace Owens, who were. And so that's what we wrote about on our website. We wrote about the concerns, not about Charlie Kirk per se, but about people in the Turning Point movement like Candace Owens. Now, that's just true. But it's also true that Charlie Kirk was very pro-Israel and spoke out against anti-Semitism. We should have done a better job to highlight that. We have to own that. We could have done better. So look, I would not be so presumptuous to say that ADL always gets it right. But I do think, Ariel, we are a learning organization that tries to process when we get it wrong so we can do a better job next time.
Okay, another issue that's interesting to get your opinion on, and maybe also the ADL and the way they've tackled this issue was the DEI thing.
Yeah.
So in America, in the entire West, but I think in America especially, on I would call it the more left-leaning side of business, politics, universities, all that, DEI was this huge thing.
Yeah.
In some places it still is, but I think it's been going down a little bit in terms of the weight, the importance, the weight that's being put on it. And DEI, part of it was to basically say there is, I think the thought behind it was there's groups that have been institutionally discriminated against. There are groups that have institutional advantages, and therefore we should help the groups that have been institutionally disadvantaged. And obviously any help, to me it seems, to disadvantaged groups will come at the expense of the advantaged groups. So now, if I'm a white person who is applying to Harvard, and if they have DEI, meaning they'll accept people with lower grades from certain backgrounds, then I might get passed over because it's not infinite. And so that was a breeding ground, I think, for a lot of I would say disenfranchisement by especially young white men. We see that all over, which blades over to anti-Semitism in a lot of places. And also it hurts the Jews because Jews are very successful financially, educationally, and so we're not looked upon by the DEI establishment as disadvantaged. Do you agree with both of those points? And what was the ADL thought process on DEI?
So there's a lot in there too.
Yeah.
So let's step back. I would say that I absolutely positively believe in the value of diversity. I do. I think we benefit from teams that are composed of people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different perspectives. I think I make better decisions when I have a range of views.
Yeah.
I also believe generally in notions of equality, as in I think all of us should be treated the same irrespective of our differences, as long as we have the merit and show up. And I believe in this idea of inclusion, which is like we should create spaces that are participatory where everyone can engage, right? Again, irrespective of their difference. So I believe in diversity and I believe in equality and I believe in inclusion. But the DEI industrial complex is part of how we got to the situation we're in today. And anyone who doesn't see that as either denying the facts or they're deluded. So what do I mean by that? I mean, we saw a class, and not everyone involved, many people involved in DEI were doing it for all the right reasons. But indeed, systems that are predicated like on the color of your skin rather than the content of your character are not good. Systems that are predicated on, again, your perceived race rather than your merit and your talent are a problem. So I believe in affirmative action and the merit of giving everyone an equal opportunity. I don't believe in quotas at all.
And that's what we had.
That's where
a lot of universities, for example.
And I think the DEI industrial complex sort of enforced this oppressor-oppressed hierarchy. And yes, you're right that in that bizarre sorting that was basically based on the color of your skin or how what they perceive that to be. Yeah, like Jews are saying, oh, you're white, you're over here, versus Black or indigenous or other people of color, you're over here. So again, both systems are bad.
And the Jews get blamed for both things.
They do.
So we were not in part of the DEI beneficiaries, but the white nationalists look at the Jews as as not white enough, and therefore, which does it also...
I mean, that in and of itself, you're exactly right in that diagnosis.
Yes.
We're not white enough for the DEI advocates, and we're too white.
Right.
Sorry, we're too white for the DEI people, not white enough for the white nationalists. That should be a sign that something's wrong with these both systems, both ideas. So whether it's white supremacy or DEI industrial complex, these systems that sort us simply based on how we show up rather than what we do and what we can accomplish, they're both deep. They're not just flawed; they're fundamentally wrong.
I agree. And one other thing that's interesting, we're doing this a few days after the Super Bowl.
Right.
We had an advertisement in the Super Bowl against anti-Semitism by the organization. Are you part of it?
I mean, I saw the ad.
Yes. So my question about that, it caused a firestorm in the Jewish community.
It did.
And the reason, as I understand it, and I think it resonates with me, probably because also I'm Israeli, and there's a different way, just because here we feel almost invincible sometimes.
Yeah.
So if you looked at the ad from an Israeli eyes, and I showed it to my wife, she's 100% Israeli, is why are they showing the Jew as this weak kid, smaller than all the other ones, who can't stand up for himself, and he's walking in the school, and they're hitting them, and the hateful comments, and he's all weak, he's not responding, he's dejected. He goes, this big, more African-American, I think, kid comes to his aid.
Right.
Why is the strategy, at least in some parts, to portray Jews as this weak link that needs some stronger person to stand up for them? I see Jews as very strong people, very resourceful, smart, powerful even. Yeah. Why are we portraying us as weak?
So first of all, I had nothing to do with the ad.
Right,
I didn't see it ahead of time. I didn't design it. So... And I will acknowledge, I think there's something that you're touching on that's real. I think we need to break this pathology of Jewish victimhood.
Yeah.
I don't think we should see ourselves as victims. even though we do get victimized, we get targeted, I think we need to see ourselves strong. I think we need to see ourselves as the covenantal people that we are. We are strong. I mean, the state of Israel is a miracle. The Jewish people, we are a miracle that we're still around after thousands of years. Despite all the enemies, all the Amaleks, we're still here.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely, we are strong. We are resilient. We are tough. So, yeah, I totally agree that encouraging this pathology of victimhood is not a useful thing. Now, on the other hand, I will say that I think we need to keep in mind that ad was not designed to, like, quote unquote, please the Jews.
Yes.
Right? People don't realize 40% of Americans, 40% has never met a Jewish person before.
They think we have horns.
They think we have horns. They don't understand. They may think we're all powerful, whatever. So this ad didn't run on, like, I don't know. This ad didn't run on Israeli TV on like Channel 12 or Channel 13. Right. This ad ran in the Super Bowl, which is viewed by millions, hundreds of millions of people. The overwhelming majority are not Jewish.
Yes.
So again, let me just finish. So I wouldn't argue with, again, I don't want to encourage this pathology of victimhood. Not helpful. But I think the ad was designed for people who are totally obtuse and unaware of what's happening to us, to show them that something is happening in our schools. And one thing that we did do at ADL, although we had nothing to do with the ad, nothing to do with it, we tested that ad ourselves.
Yeah, what did you find?
We took that ad and we did a randomized controlled trial where we showed it to a sample set of 2,000 people. And we found that the ad increased favorability for Jewish people, increased awareness of anti-Semitism by 8 percentage points.
Wow. Why? Because they felt sorry for the Jews? You think?
It's a fair question. I can't tell you, like, quote unquote why, but I think they saw the visual, the ad connected. And again, I think most people don't even realize there's a problem. So Ariel, you and I, like, being in the Jewish communal space, like, we're in a bit of a bubble.
Right.
But remember, Jews are 2% of the US population, 2.4 actually. Jews are 0.2, 2/10 of 1 percentage point of the world. Yeah. We are tiny. There's only 16 million of us. So the vast majority of people who saw that ad probably, I mean, they're not aware of anti-Semitism. It's not an issue for them. Many probably never met a Jewish person before. So I think the reason why the ad performed is it touched a nerve. And that's useful.
Yes.
Now, again, I don't want to encourage ideas of Jewish victimhood. I don't. But I do want people to understand that there's something going on that's affecting us. And if this ad helped people understand that, that's a good thing. And I'll say one other thing. Robert Kraft, the guy who funded this, like, he's amazing.
Yeah.
Most of these...
And he's not like some leftist, liberal, progressive crazy.
Not at all. He's very close to President Trump. But more than that, like, he's a billionaire in the twilight of his life in his 80s. And he's not buying yachts, right, or buying islands, right? He is investing his fortune in trying to help the Jewish people. So I wish I had more philanthropists that I could point to who are devoting their fortunes to helping our community.
Yeah. And by the way, he gives a lot to Israel.
He gives a lot to Israel.
To the football, American football here is here because of him, which is pretty cool.
So this guy is doing something deeply meaningful, and the ad, I think, connected with a lot of the non-Jewish audience who might not even be aware of what we're dealing with.
Yes. I agree, but I would also say, I'm not sure what we want. If they don't know Jews at all, would we want their first impression of Jews to be of weak, like, powerless people? I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, that needs to be thought of.
I personally would rather not be their first impression, but I also, at the same time, personally want them to be woken up to what we're dealing with.
Exactly.
So maybe both these things can be true at the same time. I want them to see Jewish strength, but I also want them to recognize Jewish vulnerability.
Yeah. So I agree, but it's I guess a question of balance of where you...
fair. It's fair.
Another, like, one of the interesting things is Brett Stevens, who was also on our show and in the newspaper.
Oh, you had him on your show?
Yeah, he's great.
He's
New
a
York
good friend.
Times. He just did a speech. I saw you with Dan Cedar. You were in the crowd and he went after you.
He
Not
did.
really. I don't know. Would you say after you? But like criticized you.
Look, he leveled a criticism against, like, Jewish communal organizations.
Right. And he mentioned you specifically.
Yes, because then after his speech, he did like a question and answer on stage. Someone handed the interviewer, Rabbi David Ingber, got handed an index card that said on it something like the ADL is, what should the ADL do differently or something like that. And then Brett said, well, actually, the head of the ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt, is here. And David said, yes, he is. And then Brett said, he's the menschiest guy. And David said, yeah, he's very nice. And then Brett said, but you know what? The ADL and UJA and American Jewish Committee, they should all be probably all be dismantled.
What was his reasoning behind it?
Well, his point is that we should be, so many folks have now gotten into, for lack of a better term, the anti-Semitism business, especially since 10/7. There's XYZ organization in the alphabet soup of Jewish groups wants to do anti-Semitism. And he was saying, instead of that, we need to be investing in Jewish identity. And I think there's some truth to the fact that a lot of donors want to chase the shiny penny, right? Yeah. Do what's fashionable. And so Jewish groups follow what their donors want them to do too often. And it's also true that, look, if I think about the Jewish world, my focus, as I said at the top, is protecting the Jewish people. That's my job at ADL. That's always been our job for over 100 years. But to protect the Jewish people, we need a vibrant, dynamic people to protect effectively.
Yes.
So I think there are questions that one should ask about issues like Jewish education, Jewish summer camp.
Yeah, which is very expensive in America, which
Super
Jews that
expensive.
aren't upper middle class have very tough time
Not easy.
paying for it. Yeah.
Jewish ritual, like synagogue life, JCCs. We should talk about Torah literacy. We should talk about Zionist education. We should talk about Jewish identity generally. We should talk about interfaith marriages. We should talk about issues of assimilation. There's a whole set of major Jewish organizations that I believe should be doing a better job of tackling the major Jewish issues facing our community. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean ADL shouldn't change, that we can't improve. We need to. But I will tell you, in recent years, especially since 10/7, but even before then, we have stopped doing some programs. We've shifted resources away from different areas. We've transitioned out personnel. We are doing things differently because the world has changed. I think it's reasonable for Brett Stevens to ask, as a columnist, and for donors to demand, as shareholders, that other Jewish organizations also do things differently. Every Jewish communal CEO should be able to answer to a stakeholder, to a donor, to a journalist like you, and explain, so what are you doing different today that you weren't doing 5 years ago?
I have a few more small questions.
Shoot.
Just we're out of time, but I have a lot of different stuff. So I guess the next question is, I spoke with Rabbi Amiel Hirsch, he's really great.
Remarkable leader, courageous leader.
Very, and especially in his own community. And the reason why I mentioned his courageousness, and you mentioned, but I agreed, is that he told me that there's a problem. Mamdani, he met him before the election, and he said, Mamdani came to reassure him that he's okay, and he was the opposite of reassured.
Yeah.
He realized, he told me, that he was ideologically, it wasn't like a fab. He really hates Israel. He really hates Zionism. And I think through that, he probably also doesn't really like Jews because, like we said, and he spoke about the fact that, according to exit polls, 30% of Jews in New York voted for Mamdani. Rabbi Hirsch thinks it's less, but even if it is less, there's a significant amount of Jews that are lost. Not lost in the sense that they're not Jews anymore, but that they're sort of lost their connection to the community, to the ideals that used to, bring people together. He even said that in the synagogues of Reform rabbis, including of himself, you'll have the children of members of his community that actually go to the anti-Israel protests. How do you, as the ADL, which is, I think, the most, like you said, the oldest Jewish organization in America, and as a Jewish leader, how do you look at all, how do you process, is there anything we can even do about it? What is happening?
It's a lot. So there's, again, a lot to kind of unwind.
Yeah,
your
and
question.
in short.
Yeah, briefly. So number one, let's keep in mind the Communist Party was absolutely hostile to Judaism.
Yes.
And yet there were Jewish members.
Yeah.
So let's keep in mind that it's not new for some Jews to be working against the very obvious self-interest of the community, their own individual self-interest. That isn't a new phenomenon. I agree with Rabbi Hirsch that I don't think it was as much as 30%, but some plurality of Jews did vote for him. And look, on issues like affordability, he has appeal.
Yeah, but still.
No, I'm not arguing, but I would say that for Jewish people for whom their Jewish identity has been sublimated or they're assimilated out of it and they're not focused on it at all. Yeah, for some of them, and all he's talking about is the rent's too damn high, that appeals. But I think he is deeply dangerous. The way that unfortunately, he's in office. And, as the head of the ADL, I got to work with him. Whether I like him or not, he's the mayor. I need to make sure that our synagogues are protected. My staff and his staff have spoken. I've never spoken to him personally. And look, I'm not going to be used as a political prop by him. I'm not going to be instrumentalized in his campaign to kind of launder his reputation. So we launched the Mamdani Monitor after he was elected. You can see mamdanitymonitor.com.
He's already done things that are problematic, right?
Look, and I take some pride in the fact that he appointed some woman to be his head of personnel. She was a despicable anti-Semite who said horrible things. ADL exposed it, and she resigned immediately. And then he acknowledged they were going to change their whole vetting process, which is a good thing. Now, ideally, it's a good thing because they're going to take the raw, toxic anti-Semites and not put them in jobs. He's probably still putting them in some jobs.
Yes.
So I got to deal with it whether I like it or not. I got to find ways to work with City Hall where I can, and I got to call them out where I must. That's my job.
But you say the Jews who are the types that did vote for him are people that are...
I don't want to generalize.
Right.
I can't speak for
but
everyone's
a lot of
motives. I think a number of young people voted for him because he appealed to them on economic issues. And then there probably are some even Jewish voters for who his anti-Israel message appealed. And we need to confront the anti-Zionism within our own ranks.
Very sad.
We need to confront the self-hate within our own ranks. And again, for Jews to not understand that their Jewish state is an anti-colonial state is sad.
Yes.
For Jews to not understand that the anti-Jewish rhetoric is targeting them is very sad.
Yeah.
And what starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews. It'll eventually consume all of us. And I mean, what we're now seeing, and this won't surprise you, is Jewish people getting pushed out of progressive spaces. Even those very progressive Jews, finding themselves on the outs with others because being Jewish is what's dispositive.
I saw Peter Beinart came to give a speech here. He then wrote that he's sorry that he came, even though he hates something like that.
Why did he say that? Do you know why he said he was sorry?
Because they all went after him, all of his friends. And he can say whatever he wants against Israel. But the second he does a little bit...
anything.
Yeah.
Instead of showing courage there, he capitulated.
Yeah, exactly.
Now look, because Peter has his audience.
Yes.
And Peter wants to keep, I don't want to disparage him per se, but we have profound disagreements on stuff that I think is really pretty basic. And I don't think he's willing to even acknowledge reality, which is a shame.
Yeah, I agree. Two small questions. Number one, Tucker Carlson, which we mentioned, he's, I think, the number one purveyor and platformer of ideas that are that are Jewish hate. Like literal, you have people that are minimizing the Holocaust on his show, that are saying that America was the bad guy, that Churchill was the bad guy and Hitler, and that the Germans actually didn't really mean to kill all these people. It was just because, they didn't have food or something, so they all starved. Anyway, he's coming to Israel, I think, tomorrow.
Correct.
And the Israeli government has debated whether to allow him in. They've decided to allow him in. Do you think, really short, because we don't have a lot of time, was it a mistake to allow him in? Because I think it was, in the sense that we don't have to let anyone that wants to come to our country enter. That's the whole point of sovereignty. Their reasoning for letting him in, as I understand it, is that he would use himself not coming as propaganda to show, oh, look, Israel isn't whatever. But we know what he's going to do here. He's going to go and try to, edit how
I think
horrible
he's
we
coming
are.
to interview Ambassador Huckabee.
Right, but then he's going to walk around with the camera for sure and stuff.
Look, it's not for me to say what the government of Israel should or shouldn't do vis-a-vis someone like Tucker Carlson, but I think you're correct to identify he is incredibly problematic.
Yeah.
He's absolutely divisive. And his raw, toxic anti-Semitism is no longer something to debate or dispute. It's there. You may not know because you're here. A few years ago, I had a big public spat with Fox because I went after them. Because look, he's been bad on Israel and Jews for a long time. It didn't just start. But now that he's no longer at Fox, he's independent.
Yes.
Yeah,
all the reins are off.
Yeah, exactly. So he's a very problematic individual.
Yes. And last question, personal. Your wife is Persian, from Iranian descent. You've seen all the stuff that are happening now in Iran. My wife is also Iranian descent.
Mashallah.
What does your wife think about what's happening? What do you think? Are you hopeful that this is coming to a better conclusion? Will President Trump? What do you think? Like, this has nothing to do with your professional position, but just as a
it
Jew
does, though.
and yeah.
So a few things. So number one, I can't speak for my wife, but
Right.
my wife escaped Iran. She came to America when she was 17 years old.
Oh,
She
wow.
lived through the Islamic Revolution. She lived through the war, the Iran-Iraq War. She has a lot of vivid memories of growing up as a teenager and having to wear the hijab and going to Islamic school. And she can tell you lots. You should have her on your show. She could tell you lots of good stories. And she's an activist now, and she works with other Iranian dissidents to advocate for Iranian ethnic and religious minorities. So she does a lot of Farsi language media and such and analysis. So I get a lot from her, but I can tell you as the CEO of ADL, Iran is and has been for a long time the largest state sponsor of terror around the world. They have been an active and prolific proponent of anti-Semitism, not just anti-Zionism, but anti-Semitism, overt anti-Jewish rhetoric, not even through the lens of Israel, just saying horrible things about Jewish people, about Jewish communities. And they've committed acts of terror, all around the world. There's a bloody trail that they've left from Buenos Aires to Bulgaria to everywhere in between. So with that being said, I am optimistic that this latest convulsion will lead to something positive. I think President Trump has been pretty clear. I want him to enforce and do what he's followed through, and not just a hit and run, but to really hit him hard, because I do not think you can trust this regime. Well, I shouldn't say that. We have learned you cannot trust regimes. So it's not what I think, it's what we know. What we know is that they lie, they obfuscate, they will drag this out as long as they can. And we know that it's a revolutionary regime. And part of that revolutionary creed is death to Israel and death to America. And the sad thing is that Persia is a proud civilization.
And we're friends with them. We have been historically very well. Up until the revolution, Israel and Iran were under the Shah, were in touch. We're a security cooperation.
The Iranian people are an amazing people. Persian culture is amazing. It's so rich. It's been such a gift to the world. But this is not the Republic of Iran. This is the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Exactly.
And extremism is evil. And from Khomeini to Khamenei to all the clerics in between, like this clerical rule of this previously fairly secular country, it's an abomination.
I agree.
So I don't think that this regime can be trusted I keep saying I think. We know
can't
they can't
be trusted.
And they seem unwilling to accept a Jewish state in their midst. And they've shown a willingness to, just see what they did to their own people. So the estimates are between 30 to 40,000 people were murdered by the regime in a matter of weeks. And by the way, this isn't like Gaza, where even if you believe the Hamas statistics, and I don't, the Hamas statistics say 60-some-odd thousand people were killed.
Right.
We know that more than half of them were fighters. And that was over years.
Yes.
In
like a week, they killed almost half or even more than the Hamas numbers.
That's right.
And no one protested, by the way.
Not once.
Exactly.
Which again shows you that these quote unquote
it's because we're
activists,
Jews, exactly.
Yeah, they're not concerned about human rights. They're concerned about Jews.
Yeah.
They're not obsessed with protecting everyone. They're obsessed with attacking Jews.
Exactly.
So I God willing,
Inshallah.
Yizrat Hashem, that we will see a better outcome so the Iranian people can realize their own dignity and achieve a degree of agency and freedom without the oppressive rule of these extremist clerics.
Jonathan Greenblatt, true pleasure having you.
Ariel, thank you
it's
so much for having me.
amazing.
Thank you for all the good questions.
Yeah, and I just want to say that you are doing great work. I think that we're pulling for you, and you're
Thank
pulling
you.
for us.
100%.
And whatever differences we have within what we would call the Jewish community, at the end of the day, the differences are because we want to survive and flourish and
Absolutely.
be strong. So all the disagreements that people are going to have with us, which is good, it's good because the objective is to be good.
Yeah, look, we are not just a covenantal people; we're a Talmudic people, and so part of that tradition, right, is debate and dissent. And so debate and disagreement inside our community is super reasonable. That's how we get better.
Yeah.
There's something different though when it's not about debating within the bounds or trying to destroy the thing itself.
Which is what we're seeing all over now, and the guardrails need to come up, I think.
Here.
Within, like you said, within the liberal tradition.
Exactly.
So as I think one of the things that I didn't have the chance to talk about it, maybe we'll do it again, is that one of the ways we can preserve is to fight for liberalism. Not in the leftist sense that in America, it's
political
like
liberalism.
the classical liberalism, in the sense that freedom will help all, including the Jews, like it has helped in the U.S.
I totally
So I think
agree.
that's
I think
it's a good way to look at it.
We
I
need
think.
to realize that the Hamas movement, if I could call it that, the Iranian regime, the revolutionary creed, it's not just anti-Jewish, although it is.
It's anti-West in general.
Anti-West.
Exactly.
It's anti-merit. It's anti-West. It's anti all of look, our society is built upon a kind of foundation of Western values. It just is.
Yeah.
And to deny that is to deny reality. And so I think we need to recognize that there is something very powerful in that essential idea and build from that rather than fight it.
Exactly.
And find ways to work within it rather than in some unrealistic way resist it. So God willing, you and I get to do this again. We can talk more about that next
God
time.
willing. And anyone who has questions for Jonathan, you can put them in the comments if they're respectful. I don't be respectful, and we will pass on to Jonathan stuff that would be interesting, and I will then post them. It depends. If they're good questions, I will be the judge. It's my
Okay.
channel. So yeah,
Awesome.
guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.